I never thought I'd say this out loud, but the night they took turns with me wasn't an accident. It wasn't a drunken mistake. It was something darker, something I let happen, knowing full well what it would destroy. I was lying to everyone, my husband, myself, and maybe worst of all, to the two men I trusted like brothers. Yeah, my husband's two best friends. They were over for his birthday weekend, and by Sunday morning, I was no longer just his wife. Now I know what you're probably thinking, how could anyone do that? But you don't know the whole story, and to be honest, I've been asking myself the same damn thing every night since. It all started 3 months before that night, when I found the first text message. 3 months before that night, I was doing laundry when my husband's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Nothing unusual, he always left it around. We weren't the type to snoop, but that day something felt off. The message preview read, "She doesn't even notice, lol, you're golden." It was from her, a coworker he used to call just annoying Karen from marketing. My stomach twisted. He told me she was married, said she flirted with everyone, laughed it off when I mentioned how she giggled around him. But now, this. I opened the thread, dozens of messages, memes, flirty banter, inside jokes, comments about my nagging, about how she respected his grind unlike some people. They hadn't slept together, at least not that I could prove, but it didn't matter. He was hers emotionally, and I was just there. That night I didn't confront him. I crawled into bed beside him, pretended I was tired, and lay there, pretending not to care as his hand rested on my waist, like everything was normal. It wasn't, and that's when I started changing. A week after the text messages, my husband invited his two best friends over, Derek and Marcus. They were his ride-or-die boys since college, the kind of guys who knew all his secrets and more than a few of mine. I hadn't seen them in months, maybe a year. They'd both moved out of state, busy with their own lives, but now they were back and crashing at our place for the weekend. When they walked in, I plastered on my smile. I was still the perfect wife, the gracious host, the woman who didn't read through private messages behind her husband's back. But inside, I was simmering. Derek hugged me first. He smelled like cologne and a faint trace of bourbon. Then Marcus, taller, quieter, always watching. He looked at me just a little too long before pulling away. Over dinner, they laughed like old times, shared stories from their college days. My husband was glowing alive in a way I hadn't seen in months. And I sat there, sipping wine, pretending I was part of it. But I wasn't. I was outside the circle now. Later that night, I found myself alone with Derek in the kitchen. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, and said, "You okay?" I nodded. Too quickly, he didn't buy it. "You seem different." And before I could stop myself, I said, "Do you ever wonder if people just stop seeing each other, even when they're still right there?" He didn't answer right away, but the look in his eyes, it said everything, and I should have walked away right then. But I didn't. The next morning, I found Marcus in the backyard alone, drinking coffee and watching the sun rise over the fence. He'd always been the quieter one, thoughtful, reserved, but that morning his silence had weight. I sat next to him, still in my robe, hair a mess, barefoot. I didn't care anymore. He looked at me and said, "You ever feel like you're in a room full of people and still completely alone?" I don't know why, but my throat caught. It was like he'd reached into the part of me I'd been hiding for months. I just nodded. That was it. No flirting, no touching, just silence, heavy silence. But that moment it cracked something in me. That night, we all drank, celebrating my husband's birthday. He was 3 bourbons deep by midnight, laughing too loud, arms around both his friends. I kept refilling glasses like I was fine. When he passed out on the couch, snoring, Marcus helped me carry him to bed. We laid him down, and as I pulled the blanket over him, I saw Derek in the doorway. He just stood there, eyes scanning the room, then me. "Man's lucky," he said. I forced a smile. He doesn't act like it. Derek stepped closer. "If he were mine, I'd never make you feel invisible. I should have stopped it. I should have walked out of that room, but instead, I stood there and said, 'What if I don't want to feel invisible tonight?'" His eyes darkened. His jaw clenched, and the next few seconds felt like a decision being made, one neither of us would come back from. And then we heard Marcus's voice behind us. "Don't do anything you'll regret." But he wasn't talking to Derek. He was talking to me. I turned to Marcus, startled. His voice wasn't angry, it was low, steady, calm, like someone watching a fuse burn down in slow motion. But what threw me off was the look in his eyes. Not judgment, permission. Derek didn't say a word. He stepped back into the hallway, gave me one last look like he was asking a question without speaking it, and then disappeared into the guest room. Marcus stood there with me, just me. My heart was thudding in my chest. "Why did you stop him?" I asked. My voice was barely above a whisper. He stepped in close, and for the first time since he'd arrived, there was no distance between us. Not physical, not emotional. His voice dropped even lower, because I didn't want him to be first. I froze. Everything around me went quiet. The house, my thoughts, my guilt, my marriage, it all disappeared. Marcus leaned in and kissed me, slow, certain, no hesitation, and I kissed him back. It wasn't drunk, it wasn't messy, it was deliberate, like two people who knew they'd already gone too far to turn back. We didn't stop there, you already know that, but what you don't know is that Derek walked back in, and he didn't freak out. He didn't punch anyone. He just looked at Marcus, looked at me, and said, "Guess we're not pretending anymore." And that's how it happened. They took turns, not just that night, but the whole weekend. When one was with me, the other disappeared. Then they'd switch. No anger, no jealousy. It was like they had talked about it. By Sunday night, my husband still had no clue. He joked about how hungover he was, how wild the weekend had been. He thanked Derek and Marcus for coming, hugged them tight like brothers. He kissed me on the cheek and said, "Thanks for making this weekend special, babe." I felt sick. I watched him sip his coffee, laugh at some meme on his phone, and I hated him. I hated that he was so comfortable, that he could lie so easily, that he broke us first, and I had to carry the guilt. But then again, I wasn't any better now, was I? When Derek and Marcus left, there was no goodbye glance, no secret message, nothing that hinted at the wreckage we'd all just created. It was just silence. And for a while, I convinced myself it would end there. A secret boxed up and buried deep. A shame I'd carry alone. But guilt has a way of leaking through cracks. I started pulling away from my husband. I avoided his touch, faked headaches, spent longer in the shower, hoping the water would wash off the memory of them. He noticed, of course he did. One night, 2 weeks later, he cornered me in the kitchen. "Are you cheating on me?" he asked, no emotion, just dead-eyed exhaustion. I laughed too hard. "What, of course not." He nodded slowly, like he was deciding whether or not to believe his own instincts. And then he said, "Because I am." My body went cold. He walked past me and dropped his phone on the counter. It was open to a photo of him and Karen from marketing tangled in a hotel bed, time-stamped from the weekend his friends were here. The same weekend I couldn't speak. He looked back at me. "So, I guess we're even now, right?" Even, that word echoed in my skull like a bell tolling at a funeral. Even, as if cheating could be balanced out like a math equation. As if our pain canceled each other's out, but it didn't. It just multiplied. I stared at the picture, the same man who once cried when I walked down the aisle, now smiling in another woman's bed. I couldn't breathe. My throat clenched, my vision blurred, but it wasn't from sadness. It was from clarity. We'd both been cheating. We'd both been lying, but he looked happy. I felt hollow. He poured himself a drink and sat on the couch like he was waiting for me to scream, to throw something, to confess, but I didn't. I walked to the window, looked out into the night, and said, I already knew. His head snapped up. What? I found the messages weeks ago. I knew you were with her. His face twisted. Then why? I turned to him, looked him dead in the eye. Because if you're gonna make me feel invisible, then I'll become someone else's obsession. And for the first time, his face cracked. He didn't ask who. He knew. The realization spread over his face like frost. Derek, he whispered. Silence. Marcus. I didn't answer, didn't have to. He stood slowly, jaw clenched, hands shaking, but he didn't lash out. He just walked to the door, grabbed his keys, and left. That was 3 weeks ago. It's been 3 weeks. The house is quiet now. His toothbrush is gone, his drawers empty. He didn't take much when he left, just what he needed. But somehow it feels like he took the air with him. No yelling, no divorce papers, no dramatic closure, just silence. I haven't heard from Marcus or Derek since. Not a call, not a message. I keep wondering if they talked about it after. If they regret it, or if they were just using me to prove some unspoken point to each other, or maybe even to him. I don't know anymore. I can't trust my instincts, can't trust my feelings, can't even trust myself. I stare in the mirror now and barely recognize who I see. Not the loyal wife, not the victim, not even the villain, just someone broken. But here's the part that keeps me up at night. It didn't feel like revenge. Not really. It felt like freedom. That weekend, for the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't begging to be seen. I wasn't begging at all. And I hate myself for how good that felt. You want to know if I regret it. Some days, yeah, I regret letting go of the woman I used to be. I regret the silence, the secrets, the betrayal, but other days, I regret nothing because for a moment I was alive again, even if it was all a lie. A week after he left, I got a message. It wasn't from my husband. It was from Marcus. Just 3 words. Are you okay? I stared at the screen for hours before replying. What could I say? That I missed the way he looked at me like I mattered. That I hated him for not stopping it. That I hated myself more. I finally typed, "Why now?" He replied instantly, "Because I didn't know what I wanted. Until you were gone. That was all it took. We met at a park." Neutral ground. He looked rough, sleepless, like someone who had a war going on inside his chest. We didn't touch, not even a hug. We just sat on a bench and talked. He told me Derek had moved on, said it wasn't real, said it was just a moment. But Marcus? He said it meant something. He said he meant it when he said he didn't want Derek to be first. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But how do you trust someone who watched you betray your husband? And still wanted to taste the wreckage, so I asked him point blank, "Do you love me, or do you just love the fact that I was willing to destroy everything for you?" He didn't answer. He just stared at the grass. Silent, and in that silence I finally heard the truth, not in what he said, but in what he couldn't. That was the last time I saw Marcus. He didn't call after that, didn't text, and I didn't chase him. Because for the first time since all of this began, I realized I didn't want to be anyone's second choice. Not his, not Derek's, not even my husband's. I wasn't some moment for a man caught between loyalty and lust. I was a woman, a flawed, furious, complicated woman who made a choice in a moment of pain and paid for it in slow, creeping silence. People like to pretend every story has a lesson, a turning point, a neat little bow at the end, but this isn't one of those stories. I didn't walk away stronger. I didn't fall into someone's arms and find real love. I didn't burn down the house or reinvent myself in Bali. I still live here, same neighborhood, same coffee mug, same bed, though now it feels 10 times bigger and 100 times colder. Sometimes I hear my neighbors laugh. Sometimes I see couples holding hands at the grocery store and feel this deep ache in my ribs, like I'm missing something I never truly had. And sometimes I still think about that night, not with guilt, not with anger, but with a strange kind of stillness, because in the wreckage I found something no one else gave me, a mirror, and what I saw staring back wasn't good or bad. It wasn't a monster. It wasn't a martyr. It was just me, and maybe that's the worst kind of truth, the kind you can't escape. If you've made it this far, I guess that means you were listening. Maybe you're judging me. Maybe you're shaking your head, thinking I'm everything wrong with relationships today. Or maybe you saw pieces of yourself in this mess. Maybe you felt that hollow silence lying next to someone who doesn't see you anymore. Maybe you've stared at a phone, knowing the password but still hoping not to find anything. Maybe you've made choices you can't explain, choices that felt like freedom in the moment and left you bleeding afterward. If that's you, I don't have advice. I'm not here to tell you what love should look like or how to fix a broken marriage. I didn't come out of this with some grand revelation. I came out of it alone, but also honest, and that counts for something, because for the first time in a long, long time, I'm not pretending, not smiling through the cracks, not apologizing for needing more than table scraps of affection. So no, this isn't a redemption story. It's not even a cautionary tale. It's just real, and maybe that's why I'm telling it, so that someone out there maybe you hears this and feels a little less crazy, a little less ashamed, a little more human, and if nothing else, maybe you'll think twice before leaving someone starving in a relationship, because eventually starving people eat, even if it costs them everything. I thought that was it, that the story was done, but stories like these don't end with silence. They echo. Last night, almost 2 months after he left, my husband showed up at the door, not with anger, not with suitcases, not even with an apology. He just stood there in the same hoodie he used to wear while watching shows with me, holding something in his hand. It was a letter, not an email, not a text, a handwritten letter. He didn't say a word, just handed it to me, turned around and got in his car. I stood frozen for what felt like an hour before I opened it. His words were messy, scratched out, rushed, but they were real. He said he wasn't innocent, that he'd failed me before I ever failed him. He said the affair with Karen meant nothing, just noise to drown out his own self-loathing. But the part that stuck with me, he wrote, "You were never invisible. I just stopped knowing how to see, and when I realized it, you were already looking at someone else." I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't, because it wasn't an apology. It was a mirror, another one, another brutal truth. He ended the letter with, "I'm not asking for you back. I just needed you to know I never stopped loving you. I just forgot how to show it." And now that piece of paper is sitting on my nightstand. Not framed, not burned, just there, like so many other things in this story, unresolved, heavy, and mine to carry. 6 months. That's how long it's been since everything burned down, since the silence, since the letter, since I stood in my kitchen and realized no one was coming back to fix me. You want to know what healing feels like? It's not candles and yoga. It's not a new haircut and some cute Instagram quote about growth. It's quiet, ugly, boring, lonely. It's waking up and not reaching for your phone, hoping someone finally messaged you. It's learning how to cook for one without crying over the second plate. It's deleting numbers without flinching, even when your hand shakes doing it. I moved just across town, not far. New walls, new furniture, new bed, but same me, still carrying it all but differently now. I don't talk to Derek. Haven't heard from him since the day they left. Marcus, he messaged me once, just a photo of the park bench where we sat. No words, I didn't reply. My ex-husband and I, we're not friends, we're not enemies either. We're just two people who didn't know how to love each other the right way until we'd already broken everything. Sometimes I see him in my dreams, not angry, not pleading, just sitting across from me, holding that letter, saying the words out loud this time. I always wake up before I respond. Maybe that's the universe's way of telling me the chapter isn't closed. But I'm not waiting around for an ending anymore. I've learned to live inside the middle, the mess, the gray, the in-between. And if you're listening to this still hoping for redemption or revenge or some kind of justice, I'm sorry, you won't find it here. What you'll find is the truth, unpretty, unfinished, unapologetically mine. It's been 3 years now. Strange how time doesn't heal everything. It just teaches you how to hold it better. I don't think about that night as much anymore. The memory is still there, like a scar under fabric. You forget it until something brushes against it the wrong way. But it doesn't sting the way it used to. I've built a life, small, simple, real. I run my own little shop now. Candles, books, handmade things. People come in, smile, pay in cash. No drama, no secrets. I even laugh again, real laughter. Not the kind you force to keep people from asking questions. I've been on a few dates. One lasted a few months. Nice guy, kind, honest. But I wasn't ready, and you know what? That's okay, because I'm not rushing toward anything anymore. I'm not trying to prove I'm worthy of love by giving pieces of myself away. I'm not living in reaction to someone else's betrayal. I'm just me. For the first time in forever, I don't feel broken. I feel whole even with cracks, and that's the kind of closure no letter, no confession, no apology can ever give you. Only you can give that to yourself. So, if you're listening to this because your world is on fire, because you did something you don't recognize yourself in, or because someone made you feel like you're nothing, hear me now. You are not your worst mistake. You are not what they did to you. You are not the version of yourself that chose survival over grace. You're human and healing. It doesn't look like a straight line. It looks like this: a shaky voice, an old scar, a quiet life you rebuilt by hand. And if that's not beautiful, I don't know what is.